Located in the heart of downtown Atlanta, Georgia State is one of the country's leading urban research universities. Founded in 1913, the university serves an enrollment of some 30,000 students. Supporting Georgia State's complex technology infrastructure, as well as the computing needs of the academic colleges and administrative departments, is the university's Information Systems and Technology Department, also known as IS&T, led by Associate Provost and CIO J.L. Albert. When Albert took the helm at Georgia State IS&T in 2004, he joined a troubled organization. It was clear that IS&T was in need of a major realignment.
Well, I inherited an organization that probably was being beat up by the community to a certain extent because they didn't see the value in the organization, and they were frustrated that the organization was also frustrated. They never got to finish a job. There was so much demand and so little organization that things would get to a certain point and they'd have to leave that project and move on to another.
We had a lot of trouble talking to each other. If I wanted to start a new project that may involve improving faculty's ability to teach, I wasn't so sure if I was going to get any support from the folks who did put the wires in the wall and the servers in the server room. We didn't really talk their language. They didn't talk ours so much.
In the old organization, the managers were responsible for managing people. They weren't really managing services. They had absolutely no concept of how much money they had to spend, how much money it was costing them to provide the services. So there was really no buy-in to making that product any better, and certainly no buy-in in making that product any less expensive.
Albert knew that by performing the budget analysis and carefully documenting the costs of the products and services available from IS&T, the organization would become more transparent, improving their image and enabling them to become better partners with the university's academic colleges and administrative departments. To guide IS&T through the budget and cost analysis process, CIO Albert and his team relied on the skills and expertise of consultant Dean Meyer of Connecticut-based N. Dean Meyer and Associates. Meyer coaches CIOs on critical organizational and political issues. He is also the inventor of Full Cost, a business and budget planning process that helps an enterprise analyze and determine the full cost of its products and services. In your work with IS&T at Georgia State, you began by focusing on their budget planning process. Tell me, in general, what's wrong with traditional budget planning today?
What's wrong with traditional budget planning? Well, imagine a budget as a spreadsheet. You know, the columns represent the typical general ledger codes, travel, training, vendor costs, and so on. And the rows represent the things you want to do in the year ahead, or even better, the things you want to deliver in the year ahead, your products and services. And people fill out the spreadsheet well and good. Now, in the traditional budget approach, what do? They total the columns and submit a budget for what they want to spend, compensation, travel, and training for each cost center or each manager. Now, what are you asking top executives to talk about? They got to talk about something, right? You're just begging for micromanagement. Hey, Becky, you really don't need all that travel, do you? Just begging for it. What else can they talk about? Meanwhile, they're not talking about the things they ought to be talking about, how much to spend on each function, such as IT. Now, the right way to decide that is to look at the return on investment, that is, to fund all the good investments and leave behind the rest. But you can't judge ROI on compensation, travel, and training, eh? So what do? Last year, plus or minus a few percent, squeaky wheel, maybe look at a few major projects. Completely arbitrary decisions about the allocation of scarce resources across the enterprise. Now, what does that say about fiduciary responsibility? Or at some point, they toss it back to you and they say, look, we don't know, just cut 5%. So now you decide what gets cut. You go to your clients and say, look, Becky, I think yours is a stupid project. I'm going to cut it from my budget. What does that say about customer focus? What right do you have to do that? And are you really the best person to decide what pays off for the business and what doesn't? Puts you in a very untenable position. But perhaps worst of all, out of a traditional budget, you get this number. Okay, you can't travel, but nobody really knows what it does and doesn't pay for, eh? So the deal is this. We give you all this money. Yeah, it's less than you asked for, but it's still a lot of money to us. And in trade for that, we get to scream at you all year long for anything we can dream to ask for. And it's your fault if you can't deliver infinite service on a fixed budget. And it all comes from submitting a budget for the columns.
Well, I suspect you're going to say that the right approach is to total the rows.
Absolutely. Think like a business within a business. Think like an entrepreneur. You don't propose a budget for what you want to spend. You propose a budget for the things you want to sell to your clients throughout the business in the year ahead. A budget that represents the true and full cost to shareholders, taxpayers, or donors of the products and services you intend to deliver. At that point, executives can look at the return on investment. Clients can defend your budget for you. Hey, that's my project. You can't cut that one. I need it. And at the end of the day, you'll come away with a budget that everybody understands. Everyone will know exactly what it does and doesn't pay for. And then during the year, someone comes up with a great new idea. You don't say no. You say, great, love to do it. But as you know, that wasn't covered by my budget. Let's you and I go looking for incremental funding. So instantly, it brings expectations in line with resources, demand in line with supply, while at the same time aligning you with the business automatically, because in the budget process, they'll fund what they most need and leave behind the rest. I call this investment-based budgeting, budgeting for what you sell, not just what you want to spend.
Bill Parasco, who is Georgia State's Director of Business Support Services, leads the business office that includes IT finance and budgeting.
The budgeting process at the university when I got here was, I think, typical of what we have in higher education, and it is based on line items. It's a budget that's composed of funding for staff, headcount, for external costs, and this include like travel, training, paper, pencils, and maybe some services, and that's about it. That was about the extent of the budgeting. So when we had to go through a budget drill, the direction that usually came from the administration was, well, you need to cut this many dollars from your budget. And that usually led to looking at the budget sheets and saying, all right, that means I have to cut 2 people, or I have to cut all this travel out, or I have to cut all the training out. And you really didn't take into account what this was doing to the services that you were providing to the university as a whole. Well, the university as a whole really didn't care about that, because the expectation was that even after you got done taking the budget cut, you were going to continue to provide all the services that you were providing in the past.
Dean, I know that Georgia State used your full cost product. What exactly is that?
Full cost is both software and a method, a step-by-step process for doing 4 things. One is getting all your managers to understand what business they're in, right on down to the catalog of each of their individual products and services. The second thing is a business plan, a tactical, a 1-year plan, an operating plan. A business plan means understanding what's expected of you in the year ahead. In the business within a business paradigm, that means what do you plan to sell to your clients throughout the business or within your own department in the year ahead, and how do you plan to fulfill that? What resources, people, money do you need to deliver on those sales? The third thing it produces is a budget, an investment-based budget that represents the full cost of the things you plan to sell. And the third thing it does is produce rates, unit costs of your products and services that goes in your catalog. Now, whether or not you charge back, you still need unit costs. It's a fabulous basis for benchmarking. Can I buy it cheaper outside? And it becomes the basis for governance processes, for costing out new projects and services mid-year and understanding whether the ROI is there.
So when we looked at the full cost model, it was very clear to us that we're on that initial team that was making the decision to do this, that the budget was going to be very different. It was going to include all the costs that were associated with delivering these services, and that was the focus of the budget, was services, not how many headcount you had or how much travel you were doing. And there was a very clear relationship between how all those costs fit together, so that when you looked at the budget, it was we weren't asking for any money that we didn't need to provide the services that our customers were demanding or that expected. So we could take the budget back to them and say, all right, in order for us to provide this service, this is the entire amount that it costs. And we didn't have to really go back in and answer questions from them about, well, how many manpower is that? Because they knew that by looking at the detail that we had gone through, that we'd taken that into account. We weren't hiding anything. There weren't any bodies that we're just keeping here over the side to do special projects. Everything was considered, and that became the basis of our budget. It was a truthful statement to the university. It was totally open that this is what we needed to operate in order to give you what you expect.
Now we can show the institution what it takes to run the business and what the costs are for anything they want to do. So if they come at us with new projects, they want something custom, we at least have a rate table. And our rate tables, by the way, are compared with outside rates, so we know what we compare to the outside world in terms of cost, and we can give them a cost, and we basically let them make the decision of where they care to do business, or if they want to do that business.
Well, the implementation of full cost at IS&T was truly a radical shift from the traditional budget process that had been practiced in the past. Let's return to Bill Parasco, who shares his observations about those who embraced full cost and those who resisted the change and didn't make the cut.
We had some staff that responded very positively to it because they could see it. They could get the connection after being told what was going into it, how it was going to be used, and the value of it. Other employees found this all to be too weird for them. They could not accept the fact that the IT organization in higher ed had to be run like a business. So what we had left was a group of people that believed in the process. They were willing to work through it. It was an awful lot of work, and they put a lot of time into it. And they were very excited the first time we pushed the button on the application and we came up with rates. And they said, I get it. My rate's too high. Got to do something about that. And that was all they needed to say.
The last thing I thought we needed was some advanced bean counting mechanism, and it got me a bit worried because I knew how much time we were about to spend on it. I think we scheduled a few days a week to start off with, and that worried me because it pulled a lot of my time away from my team and a lot of my team's time away from their clients. And I wasn't so comfortable with that at first. I thought at first maybe if we can just kind of make it through this, things will go back to normal and things will be good again. Wasn't quite the case. In a good way. The numbers started getting a little bit tough. We started figuring out exactly how much we cost the university. And we started measuring, well, what do we do against how much it costs? Are we providing good value? On some things we were doing, we actually thought, wow, we're actually really competitive with the market. Some things, not so much. So the numbers can be a little bit scary at first, but then when you take power over the numbers and start figuring out how to work those for you, things turn out a lot better in the end.
With the implementation of full cost and the IT cost analysis complete, CIO J.L. Albert had fulfilled his key realignment goals for IS&T. Our interview guests now sum up the benefits.
So what full cost did for us, just plain and simple, it helped us figure out what it was we could be good at, what it was we could deliver, very simplest basis, who our customers were. We line those two things up and we figure out how to do the best service for our customers who need us the most. And when we tied those two things together, it was just kind of magic after that. We figured out where to go. Since we started doing that model of thinking, we've actually turned up several very important projects that we've been able to start. One of those was actually a request for bid project that went out from one of our grant-funded units on campus. They had received a large grant to provide some educational training on a nationwide level, but they really needed some IT support to back that up. They needed videos created, animations created, interactive pieces created. They needed the whole thing hosted online, and that was something my team had a lot of expertise in. And we put our rates together. We figured out exactly how much this was going to cost us. We told them, and we won the bid. I don't think we would have seen that a few years before. In fact, we didn't see that a few years before.
So when we sit down as a leadership team or even a senior management team, we're not having those old turf battles, the discussions that we had before. We're now talking about, okay, is this the right decision for us to make? Is this the right service line for us to be in? Or do we need to shut something down? Or, where are all these costs coming from that are driving these rates up? And so we have a very different conversation than we had 5 years ago when we started this. So I think the benefit to the organization is extreme. The benefit to the university is growing, and we just have to build on it.
As we've heard our interview guests explain, working through the realignment, though very challenging, was certainly well worth the effort. For the benefit of our viewers belonging to organizations that may be considering or currently working through a similar endeavor, we return once more to our IS&T interview guests, Julian Allen, Bill Paraska, and J.L. Albert, who offer these parting words of advice.
If you make the decision that you want to introduce this structure into your budgeting process, you have to follow it all the way through.
The entire full cost project is not for the faint of heart when it comes to looking at the cost of labor investment. There is considerable hours in this. You need to understand the commitment that it takes from you and the organization, and you need to have the support of your executives to make this really happen. But the value is more than worth it, and the value repeats itself year after year, and that's the good part.
IT and business leaders around the globe continue to be pressed to do more with less. By utilizing innovative tools like full cost, organizations can improve their productivity and profitability and offer improved products and services that are of a greater value to their internal and external customers. To close our program, let's return to Dean Meyer for some final comments.
You know, the traditional approach to budgeting says you squeeze them on resources and they'll step up to the challenge and perform better. I'm not buying that. They're not going to do more with less. It's not like they've been wasting money and time all these years, and suddenly you tell them to do more with less, and they'll say, oh, gee, okay, I'll stop wasting money. No, these are leaders who have continually driven cost savings and process improvements. If you're going to give them less, they're going to do less. The purpose of budgeting is not to harass them or get them to promise more than they can deliver. It really should be to allocate the scarce resources of the enterprise to the purposes that have the best return, the purposes that need it the most. So instead of looking at their costs and trying to teach them how to run their business, instead let's look at what they want to deliver and figure out which of those things the enterprise needs to buy and not buy with the scarce resources we have available.
Great, Dean. Thank you so much for bringing us such an enlightening case study report. If there were one key message you would like our viewers to take away from this program, what would you like that to be?
Thank you for asking that, Becky. Investment-based budgeting is a powerful step toward the business within a business paradigm. It's the right way to run an effective organization.